Start admitting, folks. Good morning. Are you there? Oh, it's a great day. Shout in the morning. Great day. Shout in the evening. Great day. Shout, shout. Glory, hallelujah. Now, we can't really sing together on Zoom, but I'm going to say those words again. And when we get to the shout, I want everybody to shout. And if you're at home live streaming this, shout wherever you are. Just the shout, shout. Okay. Oh, it's a great day. Shout in the morning. It's a great day. Shout in the evening. It's a great day. Shout. Shout.
Shout. Oh, everyone's muted.
Glory, hallelujah. All right. Thank you for that. Sometimes, we get in these little tiles on Zoom and we just get so constrained in the way that we speak and interact. I want us to break out a little bit and to be the human beings that we are. So welcome all of you to this second session of the Legislative Assembly of the Oregon-Idaho Annual Conference. I'm Elaine Stanovsky, your bishop, and very pleased to be with you again. And I see there are a number of people who are here today that weren't able to be with us last night. We welcome you, and we'll give you, we hope, all of the information that you need to fully participate. And we welcome everybody that's live streaming. This may not be the most stimulating session that you ever have been on Zoom, but we're glad that you're here. We trust that you're upholding us in prayer and that you're here because you're deeply invested in the work of the Oregon-Idaho Annual Conference on behalf of the Jesus who lives and breathes and ministers to all of us day by day with every breath that we take. I want to acknowledge that Jan Nelson is here, conference lay leader, and that Jan had knee replacement surgery this week. Is that right, Jan?
Yep, that's right.
And we're grateful that you're here. And I heard that a break might have been helpful to you earlier last night when we met. And so I just want to use you as an example of what an appropriate personal privilege is. If anybody who's a member of this body has a reason that you need a break, or something's not working in the way that we're voting for you, or you can't, whatever it is, you can use that form that you were introduced to last night, you'll be introduced to again this morning, to let me know that there's something that you need the body to attend to so that you can fully participate in our proceedings. So I just want to give you that permission. And Jan,
Okay.
we're really grateful that you're here.
It wasn't a problem last night, except I didn't know there was going to be a break. So I took mine a few minutes early, but I'm supposed to get up and walk around for 5 to 10 minutes every hour. So,
well, we're going to let you do that today. And I didn't realize everybody didn't have the agenda that I was working from last night. So we're also going to review the agenda for you this morning. We're learning as we go. The other thing I just want to say, we're going to come to some legislative items today that push our authority beyond what it may be appropriate. So in our church, we're a connectional church, we say that, and that means that there's certain authority given to certain bodies, and the annual conference has a lot of authority and responsibility, but it doesn't have all of the authority and responsibility. And so we need and want our actions to be within the realm of authority and responsibility of the annual conference so that they can't be called into question by anybody else out there. We're at a point in time when there's a lot of division within the church, and we're really planning for and anticipating a split, a division within United Methodism. And we want to be sure that all of our actions are airtight, right? That they follow the rules and regulations and restrictions and responsibilities that we're given. So I just want to set that context. We'll call attention to those as we come to them today. With that, Ruth Marsh, would you open us with prayer?
I would be delighted to be able to do that. So I'd like for you to take a moment, each of you, and think about the oldest hands that you can envision. So I thought about this, and I so thought about my grandpa Shelburn's hands. And he was a farmer all of his life. And so his hands were thick and with calluses and not chubby, but like I say, they were thick hands from hard working all of his life. So take a moment, breathe a couple of times while you think about elderly hands that you've known in your lifetime. And then we're going to breathe. And then I want you to think about the youngest hands that you've had a chance to know in your lifetime. Perhaps your own children, perhaps somebody else's children, but little baby hands, or maybe those cute little baby feet that you'd like to grab a hold of and kiss, but little hands. And I want us to think for a moment about envisioning that time when God made the man of mud, the person of mud, the Adam. And I like to envision that God is just reaching down to earth and scooping up with hands some mud and dust to form people with. And the ways that we help others with hands. Sometimes the guests at the day shelter, particularly in the winter, their hands are dry and cracked and often with a bit of frostbite on them. And it is not completely uncommon for me to need to help adult people zip up their coat before they go out the door because their hands don't work quite like they ought to. The other day, someone helped me. I was fumbling with keys, and a person who's younger than me grabbed a hold of the little hook and helped me to unhook the keys from where they were and slip them into the door because I wasn't being very successful. Now, look at those hands of yours. Hold them up and look at the palms of them and think about the things you've held in your hands. Turn them over and look at the back. Hold them up like this so we can see what your hands look like. Today, these hands are going to do important work as we vote and make decisions for our local churches, for our annual conference, and recommendations that we hope to send out into the world. Praises be to God for hands and hearts and the ability to connect the two. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Ruth. That's a great, our hands are a deep subject, and we are going to use them today. So I'd like to turn to Lori Day, who is the Director of Connectional Ministry and my assistant in Oregon-Idaho, and she's going to review the agenda for the day just to help us know how to navigate our work.
Thanks, Bishop. So we have great work to do with a very simple agenda today. So following this, Laura Jacob Bartlett, our conference secretary, will update us on the roll call. Then Adam Bradell, one of our legislative coordinators, will offer us some instructions and walk us through the voting process again so that we make sure everyone is prepared to vote and that all questions are answered so that we know how to not only vote, but interact actively and participate in the legislative process. Following that, we'll begin just working our way through the action requests and the standing resolutions. And we, as the bishop shared, we intend to take a short, about 5-minute break once every hour, sort of at the top of the hour. And so that is our agenda. So thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And we'll turn to Laura Jacob Bartlett to update kind of who's here today compared to last night.
Thank you, Bishop. I have been keeping track as you all join, so I believe that we don't need to go through a full roll call. However, we have one person who was not able to be here yesterday. And so I will remind us all, and this will be a little tutorial for that person, that when I called roll call yesterday, I called your name, and then you each had a chance to unmute and say what your role is on the Legislative Assembly. So what position you hold to be here. So as a way of welcoming Funga Taufu, I have just said his name and invite him to unmute and tell us his role on Legislative Assembly.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my role is I'm representing the Corps.
So welcome, Funga. We are glad to have you here. And I would say to you, but really this goes to anyone, if you have questions along the way, please let us know how we can help you have what you need, the tools and resources that you need in order to fully participate today. So I believe that everyone who was here yesterday, who was supposed to be back today, is with one exception, and I'm going to call that name just to see if I've skipped her. Brenda Seen, are you here? So I have sent her an email and we'll hope that she's able to join us. All right, Bishop, that completes the roll call for this morning.
Thank you very much. And we turn now to Adam Bradell to orient us to the legislative work that we have before us and the processes that we'll use to get through it. Thank you, Adam.
Oh, thank you, Bishop. Thank you, friends. It's great to see all of you, and eager for that time when we can do our work in person with one another again. Hopefully you received some additional legislative content over the evening. Feel free to direct message me by any means comfortable to you. If there's any question about whether you have all the information you need to do today's work, I would remind everybody that keeping the video camera on is really important to our work today, keeping that camera on as much as possible. That will allow us to monitor quorum as we do our business today, and it will be how we vote by raising hands and keeping those hands up until we let you know it's okay to drop them, especially early in this process as we figure out just how much time it's going to take to get a good count going square by square here on the screen. So we'll do our work faithfully and well, and I trust y'all to be patient and grateful for that in advance. Feel free to keep using that Google form, and we'll try to get that link posted fresh in the comments there. That's the best way to make a motion, to get recognized, to ask a question. Using that Google form will be the best way to do that. And many of you, if not all of you, almost all of you, have been asked to be a shepherd and help move some legislation today. And so I'd ask that you kind of be mindful as we move through the packet for when your legislation is coming up, so you're ready to move that legislation through the Google form at the appropriate time. Bishop, those are my notes, but I'm happy to receive questions if I could be helpful.
Adam, were you going to try and test the use of the forms again?
Do we have a leader who's ready to maybe paste that link in the comments? And we could sure do
So I have
that.
one question that has come in, and I see June Fothergill's hand. So let me first call on June, and then Laura Baville. I see that you're here, and I'll come back to you. June?
My question, Adam, is if we have an amendment or something for a piece of legislation, do you want us to wait to use the form until when we're dealing with that legislation, or can we send it in anytime?
So much of our amendment work falls to Laura and keeping track of that language, and then ultimately doing some screen sharing to so everybody can see that. I might defer to Laura what her preference is.
Laura will need you to ask that question again.
Sorry. Do you want it, if we have amendments for a piece of legislation, do you want us to send it anytime or just when we're dealing with that legislation?
Well, since Adam was generous enough to give me my choice, I would say just when we're dealing with that legislation.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. Excellent question. Thanks for asking.
I see the Get Recognized form has been posted in the comments there. umoi.org/get recognized. Folks might see that and click on that, get that up in a browser window. That'd be fine.
So Laura Beville has requested the floor. So Laura, can I acknowledge, or you've got an act.
Bishop, I was just doing my shepherding job.
Oh, your shepherding job. Thank you. You know what will be, yes, thank you. So what would be helpful to me, we're learning this as we go. I think I have all of the shepherds' names. But if you're a shepherd of one of the action items or the standing resolutions, when you put your name in the form under action, if you would say shepherd, that'll let me know what your role is. Okay? You did great, Laura. We're learning on you. So if we're ready, let me just test one more time. Are there any other questions before we dive into the legislation? All right, we are on action request number 1, which is on page 2 of the legislative packet that you received. And Laura Beville, I acknowledge you.
Bishop, I move the adoption of AR1.
All right. AR1 is before you.
Bishop, I'm sorry to interrupt in the totally wrong way to just blurt it out, but I think we need to get our process straight as we make these motions. I believe the motion would be, I move that the Legislative Assembly recommend that the annual conference approve AR1. We don't have the power to actually approve or not.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So was that your motion, Laura? Laura Beville?
Why, yes, it was.
This is back to the who has what authority, and the Legislative Assembly is advisory to the annual conference. So in each case, every piece of legislation has to finally be acted by the annual conference. So the motion is before you to. Interesting. Okay. So action number 1 is regarding psychological assessments, and the motion is before you. The floor is open for questions or discussion, debate. And you would tell me that you want the floor by entering something in through the form that you were just given a link to. Or if that's not working for you, I can see all of your faces and you can raise your hand on your screen and I'll try and make sure and see it and call on you. Thank you. Yes, it needs a second. We are going to settle into a routine here, but we're not there yet. Is there someone who is, thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. So Scott Allen has seconded. It's now properly before you. Is there discussion or debate? Seeing none, are you ready to vote? All right. We're ready to vote. So we ask any non-voting participants, people who are not voting members of the assembly, to turn off their cameras for a moment. Voting members, be sure your camera is on. And Laura and Adam, are you ready to count the vote? I see that they are. So we're voting on action request number 1. Those who are in favor, please raise your hand nice and high so we can see it in your tile. Okay, you can lower your hands. Those who are opposed to recommending action item 1, please lift your hand. Laura Jake with Bartlett, are you finished counting? Okay, thank you. So the vote is closed, and Adam and Laura will let me know what the outcome is momentarily.
Laura, I count 19 in favor, 0 opposed. Laura concurs.
All right. So action request number 1 is recommended to the annual conference. And we're not going to necessarily do the math to figure out which of these are on the consent calendar and which ones aren't as we go, and we'll hear a report about that at the end of the day. But clearly this was a unanimous vote, so it'll be supported in that way. All right, we turn now to action item 2 and Mark Bateman.
Bishop, I move that the Legislative Assembly recommend to the annual conference the adoption of action request number 2.
All right. Request number 2 regards scholarship policies of the Board of Ordained Ministry. And it was substituted overnight, just to be clear. Those of you who were here last evening, we had a conversation about this. Some work was done overnight, and you should have received that this morning. So if there's a problem with that, let me know. The motion is before you. Is there a second? I see a second from Warren Light. I think I'm seeing from Adam, I'm afraid, Mark, that we don't have the language right again. So let me just do a quick check. Adam, was the model motion that we gave to shepherds not what we need?
It was not as lovely as Laura's. And so what I've posted there in the comments is Laura's language for everybody's benefit there.
Okay.
And,
So
and Mark used it splendidly. Mark was
okay,
right
Mark
on
did
track.
use it. All right. I wasn't sure what you were saying about it. So there's the improved language is in the chat, and Mark used good language. So we're there with Mark's motion. So is there, the floor is open for discussion or debate. You can either raise your hand or you can indicate with the form. Best to indicate with the form, if you can, that you want to speak to this. I see no requests for the floor. So I think you're ready to vote. Once again, those who are non-voting participants, please turn off your cameras. Voting members, be sure your cameras are on. Adam and Laura indicate that we're ready for the vote. So we are voting on action request number 2 and Mark's motion to recommend this to the annual conference. Those in favor, please lift your hand high so we can see them on the screen. All right, lower your hands. Those opposed, please lift your hand. All right, the vote is, the balloting is closed. Adam and Laura will help us know how that went.
I counted 19 votes in favor and 0 votes against.
And Laura confirms that. So action item 2 is recommended to the annual conference by the Legislative Assembly. Very good. We're doing good, huh? Making good progress. All right, we move now to action item 3. And my note says that Jan Nelson is the shepherd. Is that correct, Jan?
Yes. Sorry, I didn't put my name in.
That's all right.
I was trying to get ready to do something else. Bishop, I move the Legislative Assembly recommend to the annual conference the adoption of action request number 3. And as we make the motion, I'd like to make an editorial correction of the website as noted last night. That should be christmascovenant.com rather than .org. And if we could make that as an editorial change, that would be great.
So let me get a second and then I'll ask that question. Is there a second for AR3? I don't think I've got a second yet. Okay, I see Mark Bateman is waving his hand. My eyes have to be in multiple places at once. All right, so it's before us. And let me just ask, is there any objection to the correction in the link that Jan just shared? Okay, I see no objections, so we'll do that by common consent. And I see that Warren Light is requesting the floor. So I recognize Warren Light to enter into the conversation, into the debate. Warren.
Hi, I'm just speech against very briefly. I believe that it's sort of, again, kicking the can down the road and also connecting us to discriminatory policies of the past, and that this is not a helpful thing for us to support. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. That's one speech against. I see that Steve Mitchell has a point of order. Steve, I recognize you. What is your point?
I'm sorry, I wasn't making a point of order. I was submitting a shepherd for the next.
Okay, just leave it right there. I'll get back to you. Thanks. Scott Allen has a question. I recognize Scott.
Jan, I'm concerned that this asks us to support a particular legislative packet or intent, and I'm not clear what the other legislation that may be involved in this might suggest. So though I do not, I support remaining a global church and effective ministry in cultural and historical context, I'm feeling like I'm being asked to choose this before I know what other choices might be. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I guess. I understand your hesitance. I submitted this at the request of the Christmas Covenant team, who has been working with quite a few of us potential supporters. It occurred to me after I submitted that the objection that you raise would be exactly what a lot of people would be feeling. Because not everybody here is totally plugged into all the goings on of General Conference and all the alternatives that have been suggested. I prepared, sorry, I'm on drugs this morning, so I'm not being very coherent, but I did prepare a substitute motion that asks us to study this rather than to support it at this time. If that would be helpful, I'd be willing to make that motion.
Well, let's see. We have, I think we have at least a couple of, let's just hold on that. You put that information out there, but there are a couple of other people who are requesting the floor. So let's see how the conversation unfolds. I recognize Mark Bateman.
So Bishop, I may need some help with this. It may be that the motion I would like to make would be more appropriate at another time in the discussion.
Okay.
Shall I share my thinking and then we can figure out where it makes the most sense?
I think it's okay to, it's a sort of a it's not a procedural motion, but it's a technical motion. I think it's okay to, well, let me promise to call on you, and I know you'll flag me down if I forget to do it before we actually take the vote. How would that be, Mark?
That sounds good. Thank you.
You want to just tell people what it is you're going to do so that,
Sure.
Yeah.
So in the event that we end up with the current resolution that could end up with 90% plus of our vote as a legislative assembly, my motion would be that despite the high level of support, it not be on a consent calendar, so that the annual conference would have an opportunity to actually engage in the same conversation that we will engage in.
that's, so let's just take a pause in our deliberation here and ask Adam to advise us about what the process is to ensure that something's not included in the consent calendar.
Thanks, Bishop. So anything that receives 90% support from the Legislative Assembly might make the consent calendar. There are some exceptions to that. For example, action requests that impact the budget and require CFNA review, as well as new standing resolutions, are not eligible for that consent calendar. But anytime the vote count gets that high, it's possible that a particular standing resolution or action request might get on the consent calendar. Anything can be taken off the consent calendar if 40 people want it off the consent calendar, of course. But we have two items that we're going to look at really closely that we've just recommended unanimously that may be on that consent calendar. So we're well on our way to filling that out, perhaps. And Mark's point's a very good one.
So we'll come back. So I think, Mark, we would wait until we actually have adopted it, and perhaps, and it'll allow us a break for Adam and me to put our heads together too about procedurally how to do this. It might be that we'll do it at the end. We would do it, consider that motion at the end of when we hear the report of what's being put on the consent calendar.
So Bishop, can I, and the only concern I have about that order is that if this motion were going to be defeated, it could change somebody's vote on the original adoption.
I'm not following.
So for me, I feel so strongly that it be discussed by the annual conference and not end up on a consent calendar. I would vote against the motion, the adoption, if in order to help force it off the consent calendar, rather than potentially showing support for the concept if I knew that it was going to be.
I think I hear what you're saying. So Adam, there's not, as far as you're aware, a process by which this body could make its adoption, decide prior to acting on the action item, a condition that it not be included on the consent calendar. Is that correct?
I'm looking at that rule now. I want to see if it's a 90%, then it shall or may. So I think that's the at the crux of Mark's request. %.
Mark, I'm going to hold your question. We're not going to vote on this until we get some satisfaction about it. Wendy Woodworth has requested the floor. I recognize Wendy.
Hi, good morning. Originally, I said I wanted to speak for this, and I think I want to speak for Jan's suggested motion that this recommendation is it gets studied. The delegation has talked about the Christmas covenant. There's aspects of it that we find positive. It's not a perfect solution, and it works best in concert with.
So Wendy, I'm going to interrupt you. If you want to make a motion, if you want to make Jan's motion, you can do that and then speak to it, but you can't speak to it first and then make the motion. So I'm just wondering why you're waiting for Jan.
Because she brought it up first. I wanted to give her first, first dibs. Jan, you can nod your head if I can make the motion.
I have a substitute motion already written out.
I will defer to my friend and colleague on the delegation team, Jan, and give my time to her.
All right, Jan, I give you the floor.
Okay, I've already submitted the substitute motion. So I would move that we substitute the text, and I don't know the best way to get that in front of people. Should I just read it, or?
You can read it, but I think we also have the ability to screen share. Is that correct? Does somebody have it and ready to screen share?
Laura should have it. I submitted it through the Get Recognized.
I am not seeing it, so I'm asking for help from Lori. I'm not seeing it on the Get Recognized.
It is here. Hold on.
Oh, I was, okay, got it.
Um,
I just need to find it. Okay. Take me just a moment.
Here, I have it. I'm ready if you would like me to share that.
That's fine. Yeah.
I love being the guinea pig. This is, oh, okay. The bulleting didn't come out quite right. So the motion is to substitute the following text for the full text that I originally submitted. That we affirm the work of the team that produced the Christmas covenant legislation as a step toward a more equitable structure for the United Methodist Church. We value the voices of members outside the USA that have long been absent from submitting legislation to the General Conference. And second, that we urge our annual conference and especially our delegation to study this legislation as a possible way to a more just and less colonialist church. The legislation and supporting information can be found at christmascovenant.com. So Bishop, I would move that substitution.
All right, this motion is before you. Well, it's not before you. Is there a second?
Second.
Right, it's moved and seconded to substitute the language that's on your screen for the language that you received in advance. And thank you. The first thing we have to do is to substitute it, and then we have to act to adopt it. Those are two action items. So the motion is to substitute, and Mike, I'm not certain. So is there any discussion about whether or not to substitute? I'm not seeing anyone asking for the floor to discuss this, the substitution. So if you're ready to vote whether or not to substitute the new language for the old language, if those of you who are not voting members would turn off your cameras, those of you who are voting members, keep your cameras on. And Laura and Adam will let me know when they're ready for the vote.
Lori, can you stop the screen share, please? Thank you so much.
Okay. So those who would vote in favor, please lift your hands so we can see them on the screen. Keep them up. Thank you. You can lower your hands. And those who are opposed to substituting, please lift your hands. All right, the vote is completed. And we await the outcome.
I counted 19 in favor, 0 against.
All right. So the motion that's before us now is the new language, and I'm going to ask you to screen share that once again. This is the motion that's before us, and the motion is to recommend this to the annual conference. So I'm going to go back to Mark and ask Mark if he is still interested in ensuring, if we were to adopt this, are you still concerned about not having this on the consent calendar?
I would still prefer that there be guaranteed discussion at the annual conference of anything related to the significant structural changes to the United Methodist Church. So I would prefer that this not be on the consent calendar.
So your concern, I'm okay, hold that thought, and I'm gonna come back to it. I'm gonna be a little loose and fast with the agenda today, or at least the conversation. So let's go ahead and vote on this. Because it's the motion that's before us, and we haven't found yet a way that this body can do what Mark's asking. So I'm gonna come back to the question of what to do with Mark's desire. But let's proceed to vote on this. Is there discussion about the pros and cons, the positives and negatives of the substitute that has become the same motion? Nope, we got to keep that language up there till we're finished voting because people don't have it anywhere else. Is there discussion? Steve Ross, I don't know where your request for the floor fits into where we are in the parliamentary procedure. Do you still want the floor, Steve?
Yes, please.
Okay, I recognize Steve Ross.
So my objection to the pre-substitution was much stronger, but even the substitute motion implies a level of support that I'm not sure I share, and I'll very simply say what the problem I have with the Christmas covenant is. It treats the entire United States as a single cultural zone, and any serious consideration of the history of the United Methodist Church and the previous Methodist Church will reveal that there are significant cultural differences between our United Methodist Church in the United States, and a proposal that separated jurisdictions on an equal basis to central conferences would be far more likely to succeed in a peaceful and united church than making the United States a single cultural zone.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other requests to speak. Does anyone else wish to speak? And I'm just going to call attention to the fact that aside from Mark Bateman, I think all the speakers so far have been clergy, and that's not the church that we know and love. So I encourage lay members of the body to also feel that you have access to the floor and that your questions and your thoughts are important to us. Encourage that. So let me ask one more time. Does anybody want the floor to speak to this? Warren Light, do you have a point of order question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're understanding it based on the rule that is printed in the chat by Adam. It sounds like you can't revisit this thing once it's passed if it's a 90%. I mean, you can get 40 people at conference to take it off consent calendar, but that's something that people I think should understand before the vote. That if this is passed or turned down by 90%, it should be on the consent calendar based on the rule. And so revisiting Mark's concern later, I think, is after the horse has left the barn, according to the rule. But that's always been our traditional understanding of the rule prior to this year, at least in the last several years that I've been involved in this. So, and I think the rule's pretty clear.
So what I heard, all right. So there's another question, but we're going to be a little loose here. What I heard in Mark's concern was broader than this particular item, and it had to do with anything that affects the big tectonic shifts in the denomination that are before us. And so one way of addressing that might be, I was just reading Steve Mitchell's note here. It would be a Steve Mitchell thing, would be to move at the beginning of the annual conference session to suspend the rules to remove anything affecting the future of the United Methodist Church from the consent calendar. With the understanding, Mark and others, and Warren and others, that those are kind of a different order of significance to us, and they interplay with one another. They're not discrete, potentially discrete topics. So let me just try this. Can I take a straw poll of the Legislative Assembly just to get a sense of the will of the body? This is not binding, but how many people resonate? Can I see the hands of the people who resonate with Mark's concern that the big, what's the future of United Methodism look like? Issues, whether it's this plan or the protocol or the number of other structural proposals that will undoubtedly be before us at a general conference, that those ought not to be, all of those ought to be subject to conference debate. How many people share that concern? So all right. I'm allowing us to get lost. I'm gonna come back to this after just a minute, Mark. I have several people in line, including you, but I'm gonna turn to Scott Allen first.
I didn't have a present question. That was a previous question.
I wondered that. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. All right, then Mark, you are up next.
I'm perfectly happy for us to take a vote. I have a strategy that I think will work.
I knew you would. Thank you. All right. Is there further discussion of the new substituted main motion? Not seeing anything on my screen, not seeing any hands. Then those of you who are not voting members, please turn off your cameras. Those who are voting members, keep your cameras on. We'll look to Laura and Adam for an indication that they're ready. They're ready. All right. All who would vote in favor of recommending this substituted motion to the annual conference, please raise your hand so we can see it. Keep it up. All right, put your hands down, and all those who are opposed to making this recommendation, lift your hand. Laura and Adam, are you ready?
Abstentions, Bishop.
Oh, Mark, you're treading on difficult waters.
Bishop, Adam and I need to
need a moment. Okay.
Well, actually, we need to ask for you to ask for the yays and nays because our counts do not agree.
Okay. So you're right. I haven't been. I'm gonna take a moment. Well, we're gonna finish this vote. All right. I have not been asking for abstentions, and I intended to, Mark, even though it's not really according to our rules. It has been the practice of the Oregon-Idaho Conference. It's not really appropriate. An abstention means that you're choosing not to vote. It means abstain from vote. I know this inside out from the professional parliamentarians that work with General Conference, and I've read the rules and the rules of the General Conference overnight. I'm confident that I'm right about this, but I wasn't going to do anything about that this year. So we will take abstentions. I just want to put you on notice that we're not going to have abstentions next year.
So the only reason I raised this is that was the briefing we got last night.
I know, you're right. You're right. And I, in our pre-meeting, I said that we were going to do it that way, and then I didn't do it. So my apologies. The reason I didn't do it is because I know it's not right, but we're going to do it. Okay. And nobody's going to challenge it because that's how we've always done it before. All right. We're going to take this vote again. There was some discrepancy in the counting. So those who would support recommending the substituted action request to the annual conference, please raise your hand. All right, you can lower your hands. And those who oppose, please lift your hand. And those abstaining? All right, the vote is closed. Thank you. All right, what's the vote?
Our vote counts agree, 14 in favor, 4 opposed, 1 abstention.
Thank you. So this is action request number 3, as substituted, will be recommended to the annual conference. We move now to action request number 4. And Steve Mitchell, if you would.
Bishop, I move that the Legislative Assembly recommend to the annual conference adoption of action request number 4.
All right, this motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Scott. Seconded by Scott Allen. This is regarding unfunded pension liabilities. We had some conversation about this last evening. The motion is before you for discussion. And I just note that the treasurer, Dan Wilson-Fay, I think is with us, though not on screen. Is that correct? So I've asked to have Dan brought on screen, and Mike Benishek is the Board of Pensions chair and is here as well. No, not chair. Say it again, Mike. Unmute. Sorry.
Not chair.
But a member of the board. So I want to just invite, as we begin to consider this, we had conversation last night, it raised some questions. So I want to invite first Dan and then Mike to put this in the context of the work of the Board of Pensions in the Life of the Conference.
Thank you, Bishop. I think actually for Legislative Assembly, Steve Mitchell is the Board of Pensions representative, and Mike
Thank you.
carries another role, but Mike is on the Board of Pensions. So this is a complicated matter, and I thank Reverend Fellers for bringing this action request to the body for consideration. It's a matter, to be really honest, has been kicked down we've kicked the matter down the road for quite a while. 2 years ago, the General Conference approved paragraph 2553, which is the option for disaffiliation of a local church. But there were questions about that. And it wasn't long after that the Council of Bishops petitioned the Judicial Council for a declaratory decision on the validity of the vote that established this paragraph. There were questions about whether it was effective immediately. And the Judicial Council at that time said yes. Later, the General Commission on, or the Commission on the General Conference actually nullified the action of 2553, and pretty much then COVID hit. And the Judicial Council, which had the declaratory decision request on its docket, did not issue a ruling until the 16th of this month, April 16th, where they said that the action of the General Conference Commission was not correct and that paragraph 2553 is fully in force. In that interim period, we had a couple of churches inquire in our annual conference whether they might disaffiliate, but at the direction of the leadership, we were telling them we're waiting on the Judicial Council. There have been no disaffiliations in Pacific Northwest Annual Conference, none in Cal Nevada at this point. And we haven't had any in our annual conference, although some are starting to think and ask about that. So there's two pieces to a disaffiliation that are basic. Number one is the big disaffiliation agreement. There's a document that's put out by General Counsel on Finance and Administration to all of the annual conferences to adopt as they see fit in consultation with the Board of Trustees, the Board of Pensions, the Bishop, the Treasurer, the Benefits Officer, the Director of Connectional Ministries, and the Chancellor. It's a legal document because it releases the trust from the property of that local church, essentially giving that property to the local church in exchange for, if you will, other elements, payment of apportionments for 2 years, and this unfunded pension liability, which is really difficult to understand. But it is a mandate in the Book of Discipline, and it caused Westpath to calculate it for every annual conference. And so that total unfunded liability as of December 1st last year for our annual conference is $29 million. And Westpath calculates that number and then hands it to the annual conference and says, okay, y'all figure out how you're going to distribute that if a church decides it's going to leave. And that's what this petition is about, is how to calculate that unfunded liability. Now, across the nation, different annual conferences have taken different tacts, and some do it, base it on the apportionment formula. Some base it on the pastor's compensation and housing. Some base it on the income of the annual of the local church. Some base it on membership. In Louisiana, they look at all 4 of those and say whichever one comes out with the highest grade point figure, if you will, that's the one they're going to use. In October of last year, there had been only 57 disaffiliations across the United States, and most of them in the South and Southeast. But this is in force, and if a church wants to disaffiliate, then it's proper that we be able to tell them how and what it's going to cost. So, because we've kicked this can down the road for so long, we are not. I did not know that this action request was going to be submitted by Jim. I only learned of it on Tuesday of this week. So we're not exactly prepared for this, but you should know that the Board of Trustees has a meeting scheduled for May 10th of this next month to consider this very topic. And it really needs to also bring in the Board of Pensions into this discussion, because the liability has to do with a possible unfunded status of our pension funds. And so it's a pretty complex discussion, and I can share a lot of information if you want it, but I think that it needs to be discussed by our Board of Pensions, by our Board of Trustees, because the Board of Pensions determines the pro rata share, although it says in the 2553 that the annual conference does. And then the disaffiliation agreement, that multi-page agreement, what most annual conferences have done is to say the process for getting that thing in order is up to all of those people that I named. But then the actual agreement comes to the annual conference for the vote at the annual conference session, because it releases property. And that is the preferred way of doing that. It requires a lot of work ahead of time. And that's what, if there are a couple of churches, as I understand it, that are inquiring about this possibility. And so we do need to move in that direction. But what I'm saying is there's a plan to address this and look at it carefully. And unless you all want to fine tune it today.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
That's helpful. So with that, I have a request for the floor from Mike Benishek. Recognize Mike.
I speak against the motion. The Board of Pensions that Steve and I sit on, we have not got into this, and maybe we should have, or maybe we're behind the ball. But I would hate to put something binding on the annual conference and the Board of Pensions and the trustees that we haven't adequately looked at. My concern actually for this particular motion is this: to use the grade point figure of years past, I think would skew lower for churches that want to disaffiliate, because of the size of the conference over the years has diminished. So an averaging of all these years would equate to a smaller grade point, if that makes sense. So if I do my math, if this calculation is applied to all of our current churches, the result would not even add up to the 29 million that Dan's talking about. So churches that do stay in the UMC, we would be left with a higher burden. I don't know if my math and logic makes sense, but that's how I see it.
Thank you. I see that Wendy Woodworth wants the floor. I recognize Wendy.
Yeah, I move that AR4 be referred to the Board of Pensions and the Board of Trustees for further study and recommendation.
Right.
Second.
I hear a motion and a second. It's properly before us. Say your motion again, just so we've got it.
I move that this be referred to the Board of Pensions and the Board of Trustees.
All right. This is the motion before you, and I'm guessing I see that Steve Ross wants the floor. Is your request regarding the motion to refer, Steve?
I would speak to that if possible.
Okay. I recognize Steve Ross.
The disaffiliation policy that the trustees, Board of Pensions, and others were commissioned to define a couple of years ago, more than that, really. It has a lot of pieces besides the calculation of the unfunded pension liability. Despite some trustees, and I don't know about on Board of Pensions, repeatedly requesting that we get something done about this, nothing has been done. And I'm not trying to blame anybody. COVID, all the stuff going on has made this a very complicated time to get things done. But the disaffiliation paragraph expires in 2023. So half the time has already gone by for churches that wish to exercise this option. I think that the action request by Jim Fellers is a suitable, though there is no perfect plan. And if the trustees and Board of Pensions and others can get their act together by annual conference and propose something else, I think the conference is capable of deciding between them. So I don't think this matter was referred to trustees, pensions, and others 2 years ago already. So I would be against the substitution, and I think this holds our feet to the fire.
Against the referral, is that what you're saying, Steve? Oh, okay. You know, I no longer have the Woodworth motion before me in the form. So I'm aware, I have another request for a referral, and I want to make sure, Steve Mitchell, that your referral language, that you're confident, that I want to make sure that I haven't overlooked Steve's request.
My motion was essentially the same thing. It is a little more specific, and I can't remember if I said finance and administration or trustees. Anyway, the substitute, the referral, motion to refer by Wendy's fine.
Yours, Steve, your proposal was going to ask that it be reported back to the pre-annual conference legislative assembly, and I wasn't sure if that was in Wendy's. Wendy,
No.
did you talk about reporting back?
No.
I did not, but I'm open to that amendment.
Well, all I have is what you gave me, so that's what's before us right now. And I don't have that in front of me, so.
Yeah, that's fine.
So can we see the motion again?
It's in the chat.
Yeah, that doesn't help me, so I need it on the screen. I have 3 screens in front of me.
Bishop, it's on line 31, highlighted in yellow.
I can't get, oh gosh, that wasn't there before. What I see on here is not consistent. It's not scrolling right or something. All right. Move referral to the Board of Pensions and Board of Trustees. Okay, so the motion before us is to refer to the Board of Pensions and Board of Trustees. And I guess we could infer that if the boards of pensions and trustees have something to bring to the pre-annual conference legislative committee, they could, or legislative assembly, they could do that. But that's not part of the motion. So the motion is before you. Mark Bateman, are you still asking for the floor?
My motion was going to be similar to what Steve had, to defer action until the pre-annual conference legislative assembly and refer.
So if you want to ensure that it comes back to the next gathering of the assembly, you need to add that as an amendment. Do you want to do
Wendy
that, or are
will
you
accept
satisfied?
that as a friendly amendment. Let's do it.
Wendy, are you willing?
I am very willing.
Is there any objection to incorporating report back to the June legislative assembly? All right, then we'll do it by common consent. So the motion before you, I hope you have the intent, is to refer to trustees and pensions and to hear a report back at the June legislative assembly.
Bishop, I'm sorry, but I have a question about
Yes.
the consequence of the referral. Can I
Yes.
ask it?
You might tell us who you're asking.
You. My question is, if the trustee, if the conference bodies charged with this referral don't bring anything back at the pre-conference report, does this action request come back, or is it just gone?
It's gone. This is what we have before us now. Now, it doesn't, I mean, there are always next steps, but I don't always have them on the top of my head. There's no dead end. Yes, Mark Bateman.
If the motion were to simply defer action, and we told pensions and trustees that we want to report and they don't act, it would then still be in front of us, and we could at that time refer, or we could act on the legislation. Would that be correct?
Yeah, but I want to ask you if you really think it's worth doing that, because it's complex in a parliamentary way. I think it slows us down, and I think we've heard the desire for the legislative assembly to hear back in June. So how many belt and suspenders do you want on at the same time? Are you okay, but Mark? I don't
I'm
wanna-
fine. I'm
Okay.
just trying to help.
Yeah, no, I get you. I'm trying to get us to that break so that so that we're on Jan's side and getting that knee recuperated. All right, so let's see if we're ready to vote on the motion to refer with the expectation that there'll be a report back to the Legislative Assembly. You ready? Ready, Laura and Adam? So if you're not a voting member, turn off your camera. If you are a voting member, keep your camera on. If you support the motion to refer, please lift your hand. All right, hands down. Those opposed, lift your hand. All right, any abstentions? If you would also lift your hand. All right, are you ready to report the vote?
Bishop, there were 18 votes in favor and 1 opposed.
No abstentions?
No abstentions.
All right. Good work, friends. Now, this may seem like slow work, but this was really a very difficult and important action that we just did. It was worthy of the time that we gave it. We know that we can act in a quicker way with some of the other items. And so I put us in a 5-minute break and we'll come back at 10:25.
Friends, I just want to remind you that the live stream remains on, so we'll be muting everyone during the breaks.
All right, friends, are we ready? Laura, can we, or I'm not sure who's unmuting and unmuting. Can we unmute everybody?
I think people have the ability to unmute themselves. I just received a text from Kristen, who has been doing that. She her internet just went down. She was relieved to know that we are still here online, and we will need to, she said, be back as soon as possible, but I think we can continue our work, just not with Kristen's excellent behind the scenes maneuverings for us.
So if everybody, yeah, and Ria, is that a baby in your arms? One of those baby fingers and toes. Oh, look at that. Now, that's got to keep us grounded and joyful when we talk about pension liability, don't you think? We just drug you through one of the really important but very complicated parts of our church life, and we have great people who struggle with this and understand it well, and work to help us all understand it. But it's not the thing that drew most people to the church and to the community of legislative assembly. So thank you all for being patient and faithful and attentive during that important session. I want to make sure that I had a request for point of order from Warren Light a long time ago. I'm guessing that moment has passed.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I turn now, we're on AR5, turn to Wendy Woodworth.
I move the Legislative Assembly recommend to the annual conference the adoption of AR number 5.
Thank you. Is there a second? I see Warren Light seconding. So it's before us. The floor is open for discussion, questions, and you can enter those in the through the form. This is regarding sexual ethics policy for clergy. Any discussion? You ready to vote? All right, if I'm going to trust that everybody knows when to turn their cameras on and off by now. So if you're ready to vote, if you would lift your hand if you are in favor of AR5.
Bishop, we're ready for you to ask for those not opposed.
Sorry. Thank you. You can put your hands down. Those opposed, same sign. And in a minute, I'll tell you why I spaced out. And those abstentions? All right, let us know when you've got the vote counted.
We have 19 votes in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining.
Thank you. I got distracted looking at your hands and imagining that they were hands of blessing. So then I started imagining what you were blessing. So it was a moment. Moving on to AR7. And I think Amanda Gale Reed is presenting this. Is that correct, Amanda Gale? You are muted, my dear. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Welcome.
you. Thanks. Bishop, I move the Legislative Assembly recommend the adoption of action request number 7.
All right, and this is to bring our rules in compliance with the Book of Discipline. So it's a fairly straightforward one, I think. Is there a second to AR7? Warren, thank you. Warren's found a niche. So it's moved and seconded properly before you. Is there any discussion of AR7? Seeing none, if you're ready to vote, those who would support recommending this to the annual conference, lift your hand. Hands down. Those opposed, lift your hand. And are there any abstentions? Same sign. All right. You ready to announce the vote?
Bishop, 19 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstentions.
All right. We turn now to action request number 8. And I think Steve Ross is prepared to present this. Is that correct?
Yes. Bishop, I move that the legislative committee vote to affirm to the annual conference action request number 8.
What was your language again? Would you give me that motion again, Steve?
Maybe I'll read it. I'm looking back through the comments. I move the Legislative Assembly recommend to the annual conference the adoption of AR action request number 8.
Thank you. I see that Laura Bartlett is asking for the floor. I recognize Laura.
Thank you, Bishop. I said this in the context of reminding folks that though I do not have a vote, I do have the right to voice at Legislative Assembly. And also the context that the conference secretary is the person has the responsibility within the annual conference for tracking, certifying, verifying, understanding annual conference membership. And so with that lens, I have a number of concerns about this rule. Actually this, and I'll just give you a preview, the next one as well. I am very much in favor of the intent of these two rules. My concern is that wording, among other things, in these rules will prevent us from doing what we want to do by presenting these rules. So my suggestion, I can talk, but I can't make a motion. My suggestion is that it would be helpful to us to move to postpone action both on AR8, and of course we're not quite there yet, but I'll whisper it, AR9 as well, to the Legislative Assembly meeting on June 15th. And in the interim, a group from the Legislative Assembly could work to craft these two rules in such a way that they would do what we really want them to do. And Bishop, if it's helpful for me to line out the concerns, I can do that. But if the group is willing to just say, yes, we're happy to be able to do what we want to do with a more perfected action request, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. So, so you've heard Laura's recommendation and her comment that she can't make a motion. So we're back to discussion debate. Steve Mitchell?
I'll make that motion on Laura's behalf.
The motion to postpone until June 15th for further, it's really for further revision, right? All right. I see Warren Light's hand open. So I need to know if there's so it's seconded. Thank you, Warren. You anticipated. That's good. So it's before us. Is there discussion? June Fothergill?
Laura, I would like to hear your concerns.
Laura, would you like to respond?
Yes. All right. I'm juggling quite a few documents, so let me get the one in question open. I'll just say there are two primary ones. One has to do with the labels that are used in the action requests that do not match up with the labels, both the discipline and the business of the annual conference form used for various types of new church starts. So again, as the conference secretary, it's my job in the business of the annual conference report, or the BAC, to report out what ministry settings we have that fit into various categories. And those categories don't necessarily match up with what is being named in this rule. So I already kind of have a problem. Well, what do you mean by this? It doesn't match up with this. That's one, fairly easily fixable. The second that is more profound is the fact that one must be a professing member of the United Methodist Church in order to be a lay member of annual conference. If you are a participant in a ministry setting and you have not become a professing member of the United Methodist Church, you're prohibited from lay membership. So my concern is that we may be intending to have folks who are participating in some of these, well, I don't want to pass judgment, but pretty new and exciting ministry settings, offering us partnerships with communities that have not traditionally been part of the United Methodist Church, especially in Oregon-Idaho. And so we want them to be members of the annual conference, and yet our polity prevents that. So could we get creative in crafting these rules in such a way that we have a method, a means of allowing that kind of participation without going against our discipline? So in a nutshell, that's it.
And these two, actually, these are the two I was referring to in my opening comments, where I'm fearful that by trying to do a good thing and invite new voices in, we put at risk the validity of the actions that we take. So I think we just have to get more creative. And Steve Mitchell, I'm really grateful to you for putting a rule together, but I think we probably need to think about it a little bit more. That was not a speech, was it? Mind trouble. The floor is open for more discussion. All right, are you ready? If you would support the motion to postpone, indicate by raising your hand. All right, hands down. If you oppose, lift your hand. Any abstentions? Same sign. All right. Share the count when you have it.
The vote is 19 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstain.
Thank you very much. So that is postponed, and we'll look forward to seeing it again on June 15th. We turn now to action request number 9, and again, Steve Ross.
Sorry, unmute. Would it be in order for me to move deferral?
Yeah.
It would be out of order or not?
No, I think I'm trying to, let me look at Adam. Adam, is it required that the shepherd make a positive motion? No, he says it's okay.
I would like to move deferral of action request AR 9 to the June meeting of the Legislative Assembly.
Thank you. Is there a second? Or yeah, it's seconded by a number of people. So AR 9 is before you, and I think we've heard the rationale for the motion that came. So let me ask if there's further discussion. So Steve Mitchell, this 9 is right after 8, and they address similar issues, but no, we haven't acted on 9, so we need to. Yeah. Is there discussion? If you would defer, please lift your hand. Those hands down, and those opposed, same sign, hands up. Any abstentions? We await the vote.
19 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstained.
Thank you very much. So action request 19 is deferred as well. Thank you very much. We move on to action request 10, and I think John Tucker is ready to present this to us.
All right, Bishop, I move the Legislative Assembly recommend to the annual conference the adoption of action request number 10.
All right, is there a second to this? Cynthia. Thank you, Cynthia. You're in the Warren Club. It's moved and seconded. It's before us. Is there discussion? This regards the consent calendar. Mark, sorry.
So Bishop, I'm in the middle of typing this amendment. I move appending the following language to the end of the clause. The Legislative Assembly shall have the option of forwarding a recommendation with more than 90% vote, not on the consent calendar.
So you probably need to tell us what it has to do that. Here's what I'm going to suggest. I'm going to suggest that we not go in order, that we hold on action request number 10. John, if you would, and Cynthia, if you allow me some leniency here, and we'll just put this on hold so Mark can work on his language. And I don't know if you want to consult with Steve Mitchell about language, but I think you need to say how by majority vote, by 2/3 vote, what would it take what would the legislative committee have to do is my question mark, to allow something not to be put on the consent calendar that received 90%. You want to work on that? Is that okay?
Yes, I'm close, but go ahead and
Okay.
move on.
Let's move on to action item 11. No, when we've, sorry, action item 11 was withdrawn, if you recall, and we'll pick the substance of that back up in Standing Resolution 6. So we move on to action request 12, which we received a new version of overnight that shows us the new material, the changes in AR 12. And June Fothergill, I believe you're prepared to present this to us. Did we lose June? Oh, there she is. June, you're muted. And frozen. There you are. You're moving. Now we need you to unmute. There you go.
Right.
You're going to have to say that again, June, because your connection's a little weak.
The legislative assembly
Oh, we are stuck.
I wonder if I could suggest that I believe I heard June say that she moves the Legislative Assembly recommend the annual conference approve AR 12.
We don't even have June's picture anymore, so we can't even get a thumbs up from her.
I'd be concerned if we jump the track on this. It would raise questions about the legitimacy. Couldn't somebody else make the motion?
Probably. I was going to ask, June may come back. So let me.
I would like to make that motion.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm right here.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We're not able to hear you, June, consistently.
I'm here.
Okay. Try again.
I move that the Legislative Assembly recommend to annual conference the adoption of AR 12.
Good job. Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
All right. It's seconded. Thank you. So this is before us. Sorry about that, June. We were just struggling. You were in and out and hard to hear, but we're glad that you're here. So AR 12 is before us. Is there discussion? June?
I have an amendment I just gave to you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I move that that we amend AR 12 and in the original on line 39 to read, if a former parsonage is used for non-housing ministry, an annual inspection is not needed.
All right, I'm struggling because I'm not working off the original. So say again, it's on line 37 of the original.
Oh, then it's line 50. It's line 50 of the addendum.
Okay, so, and it goes at the end of that paragraph?
Yeah.
Okay, so give us the language, or I've got it here and on my screen, I guess. So read it one more time, June.
If a former parsonage is used for non-housing ministry, an annual inspection is not needed.
Okay. So is there a second to the
I
amendment?
can speak to it if you.
I got to get a second first. Is there a second to June's amendment? I'm not seeing a second. Oh, Cynthia seconded. Cynthia seconded. It's seconded. So June, yes, you may speak to it. But you're frozen again and we can't hear you.
I just want to, I'm kind of doing this from it. We have I'm here.
Okay.
I don't know what the freezing's about because I can see everybody.
No, your picture's frozen and we have your picture, but it's frozen. It's not live. And your voice cuts in and out. Well, you're moving a little bit now. Try again.
Okay. My experience at Ebert is that we have a house that was a parsonage many years ago that is now being used for other kinds of ministries like nonprofit offices and that kind of thing. And it is connected to the larger facility. I don't think it needs to be inspected like a parsonage.
Okay, thank you. Is there, let's see.
And I imagine there are other churches in a similar situation.
So Laura Beville has asked to speak. I recognize Laura.
Yes, I would like to speak against this motion. I have lived in parsonages my entire career. And I feel it is important, even when a church is not utilizing a parsonage or a building that they have as a parsonage, with the increasing housing concerns in both our state and also Idaho and the Boise area especially, that churches need to maintain their buildings that are original, that were parsonages and could be potentially used as parsonages. so that it does not, so that deferred maintenance doesn't keep getting deferred. So that when and if the time comes that the church needs to utilize that building for a parsonage, it can be done so that there is a seamless move into the parsonage for the pastor.
Thank you. I have a question from Scott Allen, and it's a good question. Has the addendum become the action we are voting on? And I think the action that we're voting on is what was presented by the shepherd. And my senses of the body is that last night our assumption was that those things that were being worked on, those substitutes and or refined versions, were going to come as the main motion. But let me just test: is anyone would anyone object to us using the material that was developed overnight and sent to you as the primary material that we begin with? We okay with that? Scott, are you okay with that? Okay, but I should be clear. So I intend to be clear, and it's good for you to clarify if I'm not. So we are working on the addendum to AR 12. Is there further discussion of June's amendment? June's amendment is before us. Okay, so Ria has a question. Ria, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. I'd like to clarify on line 52, page 4, when we are referring to more than one church, are we including missional congregations as well? That's my question.
Everybody there? We're on page 4 of the addendum. Well, we're on page 4 of what was sent to you overnight, which is the addendum to AR 12. And Ria is down on line 52, 53, and asking, when there's a reference to more than one church, are mission congregations included in that? And I'll just say, as the person who gets to interpret the book of discipline, I say yes. That's how I would interpret it if there were a question. All right. Is there any other discussion? We're on the amendment. I see no more discussion. So we're on June's amendment, and I allowed Ria's question, which is really back to the main motion. So we're not voting on what Ria was just talking about. We're voting on June's amendment, which is regarding parsonages or former parsonages not used for housing ministry. Are you ready? If you support amending addendum to AR 12 as June proposes, please lift your hand. All right, all opposed to the amendment? Lift your hand. Any abstentions? Same sign. All right, if you report the vote on the amendment.
4 votes in favor, 15 votes against, 0 abstentions.
Thank you. So we're back to the main motion. The amendment did not prevail. So we're back to the addendum to AR 12 as it was presented. Is there discussion? And I'm looking here. Mark Bateman, I assume you're back on the, no.
Yeah, these are I have proposed amendments to the main motion.
But this one, not the one that you were working on before.
Correct.
Okay, I recognize you, Mark.
Thank you, Bishop. I move to amend by inserting section 1, subsection I. If at any time the district superintendent deems a parsonage inadequate to serve as a parsonage and not possible to bring to adequacy, by vote of the charge conference, the building may be reclassified so that it will no longer be the parsonage. Any building classified to not be a parsonage may be rented, sold, or otherwise managed as deemed appropriate by the church and in accordance with all disciplinary requirements for church-owned real estate.
All right, and does somebody have that, or can we get that in a form that we can see it? Does everybody see where we are? We're on the addendum to AR number 12. It's on page 5 of the document you received overnight. On line 27, in addition. Is there a second to this amendment? Sharon, good job, Sharon. Sharon amends, or seconds. And so it's properly before you. Is there discussion?
So Bishop, may I speak to it just a second?
You may, thank you.
So I am aware of at least one situation where a district superintendent has said, there's no way we're putting clergy into that, that house. And while I'm in favor of the annual inspections and the church should have the ability to decide it wants to rent that, that house out and or do whatever else it deems fit. I know that there have been hesitations around disposing of parsonages because of housing costs. But if conference leadership is saying we can't put clergy in it, then there should be a way of reclassifying something so that it's no longer deemed a parsonage and doesn't have that kind of restriction. So that's the impetus for this language.
All right. So the floor is open for discussion. Steve Ross has a question.
My question refers to a different matter than this one right now, but I also would like to comment on this amendment proposed. I think this is complicated by the fact that this is dealing with parsonages, and many churches own properties that are not the church building and they're not the parsonage. They may have used to have been a parsonage, now it's a rental. A church I recently served owned 2 parsonages, one of which had not been used as a parsonage in decades and was rented out and ultimately sold. Here's my concern. And this rule probably isn't the place to deal with it, but churches that own properties that are not the church building, which the trustees generally pay a lot of attention to, and not the parsonage, which a parsonage committee or the SPRC, or at least the pastor usually keeps good attention to, often do not get properly tended by churches. They are left in states of deferred maintenance, and in some cases even represent liability issues that their insurance is not adequate to cover. And I think we have a gap, a growing gap in our accountability systems regarding those sorts of properties. I'm concerned about exempting parsonages from, on any basis, from annual inspection by the church, just to be aware of the conditions, whether the insurance is adequate, and whether proper supervision is being provided.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? June Fothergill?
I guess I have a question is, when does a former parsonage cease being a parsonage? If it was a parsonage at some time in the 150 years of the church's history, does that mean it's always a parsonage? And how do you determine that? Just a question.
Well, the IRS has something to say about it. I mean, do we have a different definition than the IRS definition if it's being rented or used as a youth gathering place or an office for a spiritual director? it's not a parsonage. It may be being used for church purposes, but it's not a parsonage. So does anybody have an answer
I
to
don't
June's
know.
question?
Or even for just this policy, how do you define a parsonage?
Right. Warren Light? Oh, I should. Go ahead.
Yes, just adding to what Steve was saying a minute ago, and remembering what Laura was speaking about, just because something has been designated not a parsonage anymore, I'm concerned that somebody else later on, another district superintendent, might say, well, it's okay to make this a parsonage, and there could be underlying issues that could be a problem for a family. Growing up in parsonages, I've seen quite a few. So anyway, I would speak against.
Thank you. Laura Beville? Laura Beville, excuse me.
That's okay, Bishop. I had a question about conference rules that we may or may not have on the sale of a parsonage. When I've lived in parsonages before, one of my parsonages was sold and then they purchased a new parsonage because of a conference rule. And so I'm just wondering what conference rules, how that plays into parsonage rules when we reclassify parsonages. Is that sidestepping that conference rule to replace a parsonage with a parsonage?
Does someone have a response to Laura's question?
Bishop, I can say that was not the intent to sidestep those kinds of rules, but it may inadvertently do so.
Mark, I didn't think that was your intent. I just was wondering if somebody...
No, it's a fair question.
Okay.
Okay.
I have another question.
Was that June?
Yeah, sorry.
June?
My other question is, if a building that was a parsonage is no longer used for housing, is it required for that building to have all the features of a future parsonage? I just am wondering, and the building we have now has bathrooms, but it doesn't have any showers. Does that mean that we're going to have to put a shower into that building in order for it to pass an inspection? Just wondering.
I think that I'd be surprised if anybody uses the word parsonage very often or in any kind of technical way other than as the housing for a pastor. And so certainly parsonage standards are written for housing for pastors.
So,
right. I'm just looking at what this says about if it's not used as a parsonage, you still have to do all the inspection. That's all I'm saying.
In the amendment, June?
No, in the original policy where it says, even if it's occupied by some other than the pastor and not occupied, this annual inspection must be done. So does that imply that a house that's being used for AA groups also has to have everything that a parsonage has because it used to be a parsonage?
So we're right now on the amendment.
Yeah, sorry.
Is there discussion related to the amendment? And do we have that language that we can screen share?
Language is in the comments, but someone may choose to screen share that.
We need to have them screen shared. I'm sorry.
Bishop?
Yes, Mark.
Laura too.
If agreeable with the person who seconded based on this conversation, I'd withdraw the amendment.
Okay. A second. Okay, Sharon, you all right with withdrawal? Thank you. All right, it's withdrawn. So AR 12, the addendum to AR 12 is before us. Is there further discussion? Mark?
So I had submitted this as well. I have a second amendment. I move to amend by inserting at the end of section 1, subsection C, it shall be the decision of the church governing body whether to provide a parsonage or a housing allowance.
Read it again, please.
At the end of subsection or section 1, subsection C, insert the following. It shall be the decision of the church governing body whether to provide a parsonage or a housing allowance.
Is there a second? Sharon seconds. And I'll be honest, Mark, it makes me nervous to do this kind of substantive stuff this way because I, for example, don't have a chance to check disciplinary provisions about that. Have you checked? Are you confident that this flies with the discipline?
There's all sorts of language all through here about if a parsonage is not available, the church will provide a housing allowance. So it seems to me that this is just making clear that the church can make a decision. If we own a house that for a long time the clergy decided to not use, and they've been renting it out, that they have the ability to offer a housing allowance in its stead and not force a renter out, as an example.
I just don't know if it's helpful. I'll just, this commentary. I have no comment. So what is there a second on? Yes, Sharon seconded. Is there discussion of this amendment? All right, I don't see any discussion. Are you ready to vote? If you support the amendment, we're not on the full motion or the full action item yet, but if you support the amendment, please lift your hand. Laura, are you good? Okay, hands down. If you're opposed, please lift your hand. You good? Those of you that are voting in opposition, keep your hands up nice and high. Okay, abstentions? Right, if you report the vote.
I am recording 8 in favor, 10 opposed, 1 abstention.
So the amendment is not affirmed. So we're back to addendum AR 12. We've tried three amendments, none of which have prevailed. So it's before us the way we received it. Is there further discussion? Steve Ross, did you, hold on, John. Did you want to talk about
So there was an earlier question about whether missional communities attached to a church in the multiple groups sharing a pastor thing, whether this rule would apply to them. And you answered that it was. I've been out of this for a couple of years, but the arrangements between sponsoring churches and attached missional or new faith communities are usually negotiated kind of case by case, and which would indicate to me that they wouldn't be locked into this rule, but I just wanted to revisit that question.
All right, thank you. John Tucker.
Well, this conversation has triggered lots of questions that I don't know if anybody has the answers to. And they are things like, can a church own a house that's not a parsonage? Does a house become a parsonage only when a clergy person is living in it? When a clergy person is not in it, it's not a parsonage. And I would love to know the answers to those questions. I'm not sure that I've seen answers to that anywhere, and I've looked at IRS stuff too. So.
And so, really, the IRS will definitely tax you on your non-clergy on your parsonage that's not being used for clergy housing. So do you have a remedy for that to suggest, John?
I suppose I would move to defer this motion.
Okay, and to a particular time, or do you want to refer it to a body?
Gosh, I don't know. Somebody tell me what I want to do. I don't know this.
All right, I think I saw, was it Ted? Did I see your hand?
Yes, Bishop, in relationship to the question at hand about a missional church and the proportioned agreement that the charge might have in relationship to paying for the parsonage expenses. I was involved with a missional arrangement as a US-2 where the missional church paid for the parsonage in total. And so that's a little bit unusual, but I think that the addendum covers that in the real simple language on the top of page 5 in the agreed upon proportion. And that leaves a wide range of possibilities for the proportion that is agreed upon by the charge. That's all I have to say on that.
Thank you, Ted. That's helpful background. Just instinctively, I worry about policies that get too long. And as I look in general at the Oregon-Idaho policies, they seem really long to me, and they often trap us rather than free us. And every time we're trapped, we write a new rule or a new piece of the policy to try and get out of it. So that's just a caution from a person who's felt trapped a lot of times. If relationships are working well between district superintendents, trustees, local church people, missional congregations, too many rules are not helpful sometimes. So I just issue that caution. All right. John.
So what if I could move to refer this back to CFNA and let them do a study on it?
You could.
Then that's what I would do.
I'm pretty sure you want them to chat with district superintendents. I'm just saying.
Sure, yeah.
Editorial comment. This is so the motion is to refer. Is there a second? Seconded. This is before you. Can we go to a vote? If you would refer, please lift your hand. And you know what? We don't have to count these. It just occurred to me. If you oppose referral, lift your hand. Abstentions? It is referred. Thank you. We are past break again. We're not very good about taking our breaks on time. So 5 minutes, come back at 11:20 and we'll mute you in the meantime.
Bishop, can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Nope, I'm muted. Now can you hear me?
I can. I just wanted to let you know that Sharon Bryan has very graciously offered to shepherd Standing Resolution 6 and 7.
Thank you. All right, we are back. We're not quite back. We got one more minute before we get back. So we need to go back though, right? What did we leave unfinished that Mark was working on?
AR 10 we need
Thank
to
you.
return to.
Thank you. Now say again, Adam, what you just told me, that Sharon's willing to shepherd.
SR 6 and 7.
Thank you. All right, are we all back? Are we having fun yet? Welcome back. We're going to go back to AR 10 that we held so that Mark could complete his amendment. Was it an amendment? Remind me what you were doing, Mark.
It was, Bishop.
Okay. I give you the floor.
Thank you. In AR10, I move to amend by inserting the following language at the conclusion of line 18. The Legislative Assembly shall have the option by majority vote of forwarding a recommendation with more than 90% vote not on a consent calendar.
Okay. Is there a second to that amendment? All right, I see Steve Ross seconds. It's properly before you. Would you like to speak to it, Mark?
I think we had this conversation earlier, so I think folks know the rationale and what prompted this.
All right, is there discussion? Let's vote then. If you affirm this amendment, we don't need to count this. I will do this visually. If you affirm this amendment, please lift your hand. All opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? June Fothergill, you voted all three ways on that one. The amendment is adopted. Thank you. So AR 10 is before us as amended. Does anyone want to speak to it? All right, we do need to count this vote. So if you would approve AR 10 as amended, please lift your hand. All right, all hands down. If you oppose, please lift your hand. Any abstentions? Same sign. You can report the count when you're ready.
We had 18 votes in favor, 0 votes opposed, and 0 abstentions.
All right, so action request 10 as amended is recommended. Thank you very much. So I'm lost. Am I on AR 13?
Yes, Bishop.
Thank you. For some reason, I didn't record the vote on AR 12, but I'm not going to worry about it because I know somebody else did. So AR 13, and Donna Ward, are you prepared to present this? Uh-oh, surprise, Donna, you're on candid camera.
I didn't know I was supposed to. And of course, so I haven't been paying attention to say the right words. I recommend what was it? Now that you did that to me, AR 13 for the vote.
We're going to put it in the chat for you, Donna. It should be there.
Okay. I move the Legislative Assembly recommend to the annual conference the adoption of AR 13.
All right, is there a second? It's seconded. It is before us. Is there discussion? This is regarding the Oregon Interfaith Solar Campaign. Seeing no discussion. Are you ready? Steve Mitchell asks, did we get an appropriate sponsor?
Thank you, Steve. I had a chance to chat with John Pitney. He was very comfortable with the idea of it. It could be a sponsoring group or a sponsoring individual. We see that on other submissions as well. So he was comfortable being listed as both the sponsoring person and the spokesperson for this piece.
All right, so we'll make that correction and put John Pitney's name in the sponsoring, well, group line. Any other discussion? Seeing none, if you would support AR 13, please lift your hand.
Again, if you're trying to vote, just make sure your hand's in the screen so I can see that. Right.
All right, hands down. Those opposed, please lift your hand. Any abstentions? All right, you can announce the vote when you're ready.
I have 18 in favor, 0 opposed, 1 abstention.
All right, so AR 13 is approved for recommendation to annual conference. Take a deep breath. We're finished with the action requests and we move now to standing resolutions. Standing resolution 1, and I think Mike Benishek, you're prepared to present this to us.
Bishop, I move that the Legislative Assembly recommend to the annual conference the adoption of SR1.
I like the conviction with which you do that, Mike. Thank you.
Radically in the middle.
Is there a second to Mike's motion? Jan Nelson seconds, Warren Light seconds, Jan Nelson. Okay, so it's properly before us. Is there discussion? This is regarding sanctuary for immigrants and refugees. It's a renewal of an existing resolution. Ria?
And maybe I should have done this last night. I apologize. Is there any way that we can change language so that we're speaking on undocumented?
Yes.
Thank you.
If you can identify the places and make an amendment, we'll help you through it.
What?
Where would you like that language changed? Can you tell us what line you might be looking at? Or if other people see it, we can all.
Yeah, let's see. I see it in line 19.
Yes. So what you would change is,
okay.
How would you like it to read?
Give me a 30 seconds.
Let me ask you this. Would you like more than 30 seconds? Would you like us to move on to something else? Well, gosh. See, now you probably don't want us to move on. Go ahead and take your time. We're with you.
Honestly, and teach me as we go. It's just the replacement of the word immigrant to undocumented. So would you like me to just list the number of, or list the line items that I see the word immigrant?
Can't you make a motion to replace the word immigrant with undocumented person as a blank covering all instances?
You might. We just would want to read it and make sure that that works in each place. So let's just go through them, shall we? Let's go through them. It's not that long a document. So we're on line 19 is the first one. Is that right? Well, the title too, huh? So how would you have the title read?
I would read it as support sanctuary for undocumented persons and refugees.
Okay. We're making this amendment up as we go, friends. This is what Legislative Assembly is for. So I'm really glad you're bringing this to us. All right. And then we go down to line 19, the one that you called our attention to.
So line item 19, sanctuary for undocumented persons and refugees.
Okay. So Steve is suggesting that we do it in every place. So that would be line 22.
Line 22, site for undocumented persons and refugees.
Line 23.
Facilities regardless of their, I guess I would say residency status.
Okay.
Line 25, be required to house undocumented persons or refugees. Line 27, safety for undocumented persons. Declaring solidarity with undocumented persons and refugees as well in the next sentence.
Oh, thank you.
Line item 33, undocumented persons are living in fear among us. Line item 41, undocumented persons and refugees are important members.
I didn't get that last one. Where's that last one? I don't think I have that line.
Line item 41.
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
And I think that concludes the document.
All right. Is everybody on board with what Rhea is asking? So she's moved to make those amendments throughout the document. Is there a second?
I second it.
Everybody's ready. Okay. So this amendment is before you. We need to vote on this. We do not need to count it. So is there discussion before we, yes, Mark?
Just a question so that I understand where we go forward from here. Does this leave this standing resolution in the category of minor revisions?
So are these, and let me ask you another question. Are standing resolutions in the journal identified as renewals or new?
The biggest impact is on whether this then can go on the consent calendar. As long as we're just making minor revisions, If 90% of us, the Legislative Assembly votes for it, it can go on the consent calendar.
Okay.
If these are minor revisions.
So let me ask this question, Mark. If we act on the amendments and then adopt the resolution, can I quiz the body about whether it considers it major or minor? Okay.
That's fine with me. I was just thinking through to that.
Yeah.
I wanted to understand where we were, but if that's the approach you want to take, that's fine with me.
Well, let's do it that way, but let's ask Rhea about the significance of these changes.
Immigrant just seems it's deteriorating of the situation that a person is in, and it indicates them as non-human, in my opinion. And so when we're mentioning undocumented, we're referring to their person as if they were provided citizenship or residency in the United States rather than who they are as a person. So I do feel strongly about the language being used in this standing resolution.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? All right. If you would approve the amendment, please lift your hand. Thank you. All opposed, hands up. Any abstentions? It is approved. So the resolution before us, Standing Resolution 1, now has, as amended, is before us for further discussion and action. Is there further discussion? I see none. If you would approve Standing Resolution 1, please lift your hand.
Bishop, we have 19 votes in favor. You didn't call for the opposed and the abstentions.
No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I got
No.
distracted again.
That's the entire voting body. So,
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. You want to announce the vote?
19 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstentions. I'm sorry. I just
No, I'm sorry too. I was off trying to read what's in my little notes from people, and so Resolution 1 is adopted to be recommended to the annual conference with the amendment made. Thank you, Rhea. All right, we move now to Resolution 3. Well, let me, there's a note in here. Laura Jaquith Bartlett has a personal privilege. Is this the time, or do you want to move that towards the end, Laura?
That's up to you, Bishop.
No, I have no idea what it is, so I don't know what's
Oh,
appropriate.
I'm sorry. I thought the text of it was in there. And in
Oh, well,
fact,
maybe
I'm
it
gonna have
is.
to go.
Okay. We'll do it at the end.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. If you're looking for the shepherd.
Yes, thank you for Resolution 3. That's you.
Yeah. Just to backtrack just a second, on the last one, the unresolved question as to whether it's a minor or major revision, but just as a witness, having been there when this was first created, even though this language is significant and I would say incredibly important, and I appreciate what Rhea is saying, I would still classify this as a minor revision based on the intent of both the Legislative Assembly and the drafters of this originally, and having only one change. So that's, my testimony toward that. I don't know.
Thank you. So Warren, I wonder if you'd like to make a motion about how to categorize this.
I would move that we categorize this as a minor revision for purposes of the consent calendar.
Is there a second? It's seconded. Thank you, Funga. And so that's before us. And is there any more discussion? If you support categorizing Standing Resolution 1 as minor revisions, please lift your hand. Oh, Sharon, did you want to speak? No, she's voting. She's eager to vote. So we're voting in the affirmative now. Thank you. Hands down. Those opposed? Any abstentions? So we will consider this minor revisions, and we can report it that way at the annual conference session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bishop. I move the Legislative Assembly recommend to the annual conference the adoption of SR 3.
All right. SR 3 is before you. Is there a second? I see several seconds. I don't know, Laura, if you write down who seconded or not, but no. Okay, so it's seconded enthusiastically. So SR 3 is before us. Is there discussion? Steve Ross?
More of a question. Last night, I wrote down that it was a renewal, but on line 14, it literally says a new standing resolution. So I just want us to be clear which we're doing.
I trust what's in writing. Does anybody have Jan Nelson?
Yeah, it is a new resolution.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Is there discussion? Seeing none. If you're ready to vote, if you would vote in the affirmative, raise your hand. Those opposed, lift your hand. Any abstentions? All right.
Have the vote as 19 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstentions.
Thank you very much. So Standing Resolution 3 is supported and will be recommended to annual conference. Turning now to Standing Resolution 4. And Rhea, I think you are the presenter. Is that right?
Yes, Bishop, I move the Legislative Assembly recommend to the annual conference the adoption of SR 4.
All right. Is there a second? I see it seconded. So SR 4 is before us. This is a renewal of an existing standing resolution. Is there discussion? See none? Steve Mitchell, you weren't wanting to discuss, right? You were just adjusting your seat. All right, if you're ready to vote, then those in that support SR 4, recommending it to annual conference, lift your hand. All right, hands down. Those opposed, hands up. Abstentions?
We have 19 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining.
All right, we're on a roll. Turning then to Standing Resolution 5. And Ted, is this yours?
Yes, Bishop, I move that the Legislative Assembly recommend to the annual conference the renewal of Standing Resolution number 5.
All right, is there a second? Thank you, Warren. It's properly before you. Is there discussion? I see no discussion. If you're ready to vote, lift your hand if you support. Hands down, and all who are opposed, lift your hands. Any abstentions?
Bishop, we have 18 votes in favor, 0 opposed, 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. So standing resolution 5 is supported and will be recommended to annual conference. All right, we're getting towards the end. You all are doing good work. We have AR 6 before us. This is new. It relates, as you recall, no, we have SR 6 before us. Is that what I said? It relates to the withdrawn AR 11 that we discussed last night. This is new as a standing resolution. And I believe, Sharon Bryan, that you're prepared to present this to us.
Bishop, I move the adoption of standing resolution number 6.
All right. This is regarding eugenics, neurodiversity, and disabilities. Is there a second? All right, I see a second, so it's properly before us. Is there discussion? I see no discussion. If you would support standing resolution 6, please lift your hand. Thank you. Hands down. Those opposed, hands up. Any abstentions?
Bishop, the vote is 18 in favor, 1 opposed, no abstaining.
Thank you very much. So standing resolution 6 is approved for recommendation to the annual conference session. And we turn to SR 7. And again, Sharon Bryan is presenting.
Bishop, I move the adoption of standing resolution number 7.
Thank you. And you'll recall that this was one that somehow didn't get to us in the advanced materials. So it's new. It's a renewal, but it's new after the packets were distributed. So is there a second? I'm sorry, I'm talking before I have a second. Is there a second? Thank you, Mark. So SR 7 is before us. Is there discussion? See no discussion. If you would approve SR 7, lift your hand. All right, those opposed, lift your hand. Abstentions?
Bishop, the vote is 19 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining.
All right, standing resolution 7 is approved for recommendation to annual conference. Thank you. Now, I'm not sure, but I think that completes the legislative business. Am I right about that, Adam?
If you say it does, Bishop. Yes, yes. All my boxes are checked as well.
Bishop, we have one question related to legislation that's in the queue.
Yes.
Line 48.
I'm sorry.
There's one question related to legislation that's in the queue on line 48.
Thank you.
From Laura Beville.
All right. What's really hard for me to know when I see these is whether we've already dealt with them. So this, thank you. Laura, tell us your question.
So my question was in regard, I actually asked it during the break.
I'm sorry.
After we voted on this. But the referral that we did for AR 12, the one about the parsonages, referring it back to CFNA, is that going back to CFNA for an indefinite time, or is this supposed to come back to us cleaned up in June? And can I speak a little bit of personal privilege about that?
Well, let's hear from Laura what we actually adopted. Laura, do you have that motion?
Sorry, I got a bit confused with the multiple Laura thing going on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Laura with Bartlett.
Yeah.
The motion was to refer AR 12 back to the Council on Finance and Administration in consultation with the district superintendents.
So Laura, what would you like to say to us?
Well, I feel like we've had conversations surrounding cleaning up the 1985 language regarding parsonages for a very, very long time. I've been in ministry in this annual conference for 20 years, and I think that we've been talking about it for 20 years. And so my deepest concern is that I'm just frustrated that the language isn't ever getting cleaned up. We always kick the can down. And so I would like to hold a timeline for CFNA to come back to the Legislative Assembly with a cleaned up language. And I'd like it to be this year.
So
maybe I'm making a motion.
Well, the parliamentary way to do that is to move reconsideration. Did you vote for this when it was adopted? Oh, Mark's got his hand up. Let me see if Mark's got a way out of this for us.
So I did not vote for it.
Okay. Mark?
So I'm from CFNA, Adam is from CFNA. I think we can commit to you that we will take it back to CFNA. We'll look at this, we'll coordinate with district superintendents, and our goal will be to bring it back. That's about the best I can promise. That our intent would be to bring it back with cleaned up language and answer a number of the questions that were raised today. And we'll do our best.
Okay. And Laura will not forget that.
No,
Laura
I
Brazil. All right. And I see that there's also, June Fothergill, you had a personal privilege regarding Commission on Religion and Race. You want to share that?
Yes, please. Thank you, Bishop. In regards to the action requests that not the action requests, the standing resolution that we passed regarding white racism, I invite anyone here who would like to participate with Commission on Religion and Race to help us implement that and do what it says in the act, what it says later on, that we will help with that. We could use some more help with that. Just let me know you're interested and I will send you the link to our monthly Zoom meetings. So please, if you would like to help implement this, let us know. Thank you.
And Lori Day, can I call on you? I think you indicated to me that there are other conversations going on about dismantling racism work in the conference. So you want to just bring us up to speed on that as long as we're here?
Yeah, so, as many of you know, one of our strategic missional priorities for the conference is dismantling racism. And so we've been having some very significant conversations about what does that mean for us as an annual conference when this is a strategic priority? How do we actively live into dismantling racism and addressing anti-racism? So there are plans for a very significant response to this, and it is significant enough that we didn't have the time to get it all ready and submitted as an action request by the deadline. So, but we will be working on this in the coming weeks, and I am anticipating that we will have a new action request for the June 15th Legislative Assembly that will likely come out of some partnership between the ministry leadership team and the Board of Laity to really work to find some significant commitments and ways that the annual conference will actively work to address dismantling racism.
And so, Lori, do you imagine that there will be intentional conversations between Commission on Religion and Race and the other groups that are working on this as well?
Yes, and it's also, it is an open invitation. If anybody else who's not part of any of those groups that I've already named wants to work with that, please get in touch with me and we will gladly welcome collaboration.
And I know we're really coming up to our end time, but another just comment is those two 8 and 9, AR 8 and 9, about how do we invite new voices that don't fit our official categories of membership in the annual conference. How do we invite those new voices to shape our experience and our direction and our attention and our activities? And many of those new voices, and part of the impetus for wanting to make sure we have a way to engage those new folks, is that many people of color within the Oregon-Idaho, a majority, there aren't many people of color in the Oregon-Idaho Conference, but a new center of racial, ethnic, and cultural diversity within the life of the conference is in people who are in those new ministries and are not fully credentialed to be members. And so we want to make sure that they have voice in this process of responding to racism and helping us find our way. So this is all really good, June. Your work is good, and Lori's giving good leadership, and Leroy through the IV team work, and many of you, I'm sure, that are on this call are part of this good work. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's a good, very crucial emphasis for us right now. And let's see. Make sure I'm doing everything. Yep. Laura Jaquith Bartlett, you had a personal privilege.
Yes, I'm not sure it conforms to your definition of personal privilege, but it seems like something that the Assembly members would want to know. When we gathered last night, we had with us Brenda Seen, who is a member of the Assembly, and we had been expecting her back this morning. You might remember at roll call, I was trying to make sure I hadn't missed her. I did hear back from her today with the reason she was not here, and I thought it would be appropriate to let you all know why one of our members was not here, and perhaps we